So let's talk about pipelines and how we can create a really simple pipeline using Git repositories, this idea of a bare repository and Git hooks. So we have an application in the app folder in our pipelines directory, and all that it does is just prints out hi from some random number. And our app directory is the local Git repository that we're working with. So this is where we're, um, you know, writing, editing, and saving code. There's another folder that we're going to make called deploy. And inside of this folder, we are going to make a folder called production-www. And you can think of this folder as being the environment where the users are actually going to interact with the app. So this is the production environment. But we're also going to make another folder called production.git. And the idea behind this folder is going to be, it's going to serve as a shared repository that really has no working tree, meaning that it's not used to push code and write code and edit code. It's simply used as a middleman that reroutes the pushed code to the production environment, which is our production-www folder. So if we go into our production.git folder, the way we make this idea of a bare repository, which is different from a working repository, is you simply use the same command git init to create a repository, except you supply the option bare. And so what this does is it gives us some of the Git functionality except for the working tree. Since we're not really actually going to be writing and editing code in this repository, it's more of a shared repository. So let's talk about Git hooks. So Git hooks are basically custom scripts that you can write to execute in response to important events like git push. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to write a script called post-receive, and this script has to reside in the hooks folder inside of the production.git repository. Remember that we're pushing code to the production.git bare repository, which will then reroute that code into production environment. Essentially, we could do whatever we wanted with this production.git repository, but all we're going to do for this demo is simply reroute and check out the code into the production-www folder. And so in this script, we define a git work tree that represents the full path of the production-www folder, and we're going to execute the git checkout command. And after that happens, we're going to just simply print out a push to production message on the terminal when we do a git push. So what this means is if we do a git push from the app repository, we'll receive this message after the push has been successful. And so the important thing to do is to give this post receive executable permissions if you're working on a Unix system. So you can do that with the change mode command and the +X permission. And so this gives us the right to execute this command when we do a git push. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go back to the app folder, which represents our actual working tree of the application. So I'm going to just make a minor change here. I'm going to say maybe hi from a random number, right? So I'm going to save that change, and I'm going to just stage it real quick and commit to test this hook script that we just wrote, and basically test the pipeline, right? So we've committed, and before we actually push this code, you're going to want to change the remote URL for the production environment. So I've already done this, but I will show you what this looks like. Now, if you're setting the URL for the first time, you're going to want to use git remote add prod, which is the name of our production.git repository, and then follow that up with the file path name. I've already done that, but it should be fairly straightforward. If you want to reset that URL, you can use the git remote set URL prod instead, and follow that up with the file path name. So now that we have our URLs all set and ready to go, all we need to do now is git push to prod and the master branch, which is the really only branch that we have. And as you can see, the code has been pushed up, and you can see that we got the message pushed to production. And here we can see that you saw that the production-www is populated with the code that we pushed up to production.git. So you can see that production.git isn't actually where the code goes. It is simply a mediary repository that several developers can push to, and you can write a hook script such as post receive that then reroutes that to the production environment. And we've done just that. As you can see, we have the same files in there. And so why don't we go ahead and run our application. Production, and we can do that with npm install, and this will just install all the necessary packages the web application needs, and then we can run our program by supplying a port number as well. And so hi from a random number 209, so our server is working. And there you have it. That's a basic pipeline that you can use just with Git repositories, the idea of a Git hook, and then the idea of a bare repository that serves as a shared repository that everyone can push to. And you can use that hook script to then reroute that to the production environment. So if you find that Vagrant is kind of confusing to use to create these virtual machines, you can check out this new tool called Baker at docs.getbaker.io. Once you install it for whatever operating system you're on, the first command that you'll run is called Baker Setup, and I'll go ahead and show you what that looks like when you run it. So I've already run this command, but once you do Baker Setup, what this does is it sets up a main Baker server that is used to manage all of your Baker virtual machines. And so it's going to check for your dependencies, which is the VirtualBox, Vagrant, and Git. And then it's going to install that Baker server that's going to manage all your Baker servers. And let's say you have a Node application in some repo. There's a neat command that you can use, bake2, and if you execute this command, you can give it a repo URL with the -- repo option. And what this does, it automatically pulls in the repo, and what it does is it provisions the virtual machine in VirtualBox and prepares all the Node.js scripts and installs the application to run. And so if you look over here, I've got the Node application open right here, and you can see that all it does is just prints out hi there. And so what's neat about this Baker tool is that everything can be spelled out in a YAML file, such as this one, baker.yaml. You can give it the IP address, you can give it whatever languages that you need for that virtual machine, and you can give it the command that it should run once you start that virtual machine. And as you can see here, it kind of changes directory into the project where the Node.js application is, and installs all the Node packages that it needs, and then finally runs that application. And if we go to this URL in our browser now, at the port 3000, you'll see that we have the printed hi there from our Node application in index.js. In addition, Baker has commands that are very similar to Vagrant in that you can check out the status of your virtual machines with Baker status, and you can see that we have a Baker, which is like the main Ansible server that is running in the background that is managing virtual machines such as Baker Test, which we just ran. You can also halt a virtual machine by giving it a virtual machine name, and you can see that it is stopping Baker-test. In addition, you can also destroy Baker-test, but before we do that, you can double check on the status of the Baker VMs, and you'll see that the Baker-test is powered off from that halt command. But then you can execute the Baker destroy if you want to completely get rid of Baker-test. And once we check on the status, you can see that Baker-test is no longer in the list.